I thought you were going in a different direction. I had an answer for you. But I think you have to do two things, or maybe several things. First of all, there's always a minority population of consciousness. Now, what do I mean by that? Because I want to say two things. I talked to the dean earlier, law school, the dean of law school, and we were talking about the word minority, but I'm using this in a specific context. One day we have to learn not to refer to people as minorities, I believe. Now, let me explain why. In America, we call minorities Native Americans, blacks, Asians. We still call Latinos, Hispanics. They on the way. You all figure that out, what I'm saying. My point is that because of how we are socialized and trained, in America today, the majority of the population is European Americans. We don't call the majority population majorities. But when you call somebody a minority, you subconsciously begin to treat them as if they're less than you. Not consciously, because it's oh, that's just the minorities. You already said that. You've already minimized who a group of people are. So I dislike the word minority, but I'm using it in a specific context here. So I wanted to explain that. There's a minority group of students. I don't mean color. I'm talking about a consciousness now. A small group, blacks, maybe some whites, students who are like mind. First of all, you have to mobilize students who are like mind. It doesn't have to be, it can't be just black students. It has to be students who, because there's some young white students who do the sagging and stuff, also. And that's a cultural thing. A misguided cultural thing, I believe. I'm getting older, so I can't totally relate. I want to tell you a funny story. I'm deviating, but I'm going to get to your question. A few years ago, I went to a high school to speak, and a young guy met me at school, and I was a very nice suit. I was down about 25 pounds from what I am now. Looking good, I thought. So I walked in, and he said, "Hey man, that's tight, that's tight." I said, "What do you mean it's tight?" My suit is tight, I think I look good. I said, "I know, you look good, I thought you were telling me my suit was tight." But my point is, so you have to understand the vernacular. And that's why it's important to build a small coalition of people who are determined to address the issue. And I think you try to bring others who are like mind to the institution to talk about how do we change this behavior, because it's not, all we ought to do is look to the example of the president. If the president was sagging, he wouldn't be president. He would never aspire. You can't be president if you had. Something happened in our culture that created this phenomenon. And I don't think, unfortunately, people don't even care anymore. It comes from the jail. We know that. We know that people had to wear baggy pants in jail because you couldn't wear a belt because you use it as a weapon and all that kind of stuff. So we are embracing what generally is something that is degenerative. Why would we even emulate? We should empathize with those sometimes who are in jail, because a lot of folk in jail don't belong there. There's something, in my opinion, that is misguided about the criminal system, because it's not a just system. It is a criminal system that targets poor people, it targets people of color, it targets Hispanics and Latinos, and as I said, poor people meaning poor whites. That's who's in jail, but largely, we as people of color, I don't know what the population of Arkansas is, but I think it's probably less than 16% African American, but I bet you the jail population is 50%. All over the state, something is wrong with that. Somewhere, black people are being targeted. Now, there's a twofold, hold on, let me finish. There's a twofold responsibility. We have a responsibility as a community. Biblically, it says if you train up a child in the way that he should go when that child is old, they will not depart from that training. So some of our parents have abandoned that responsibility. Because if we were training up our children right, there would be less of our children going to jail. Even if some, I qualify that, police were targeting people of color. Because police, there are some police agencies. Now, this is not saying police are bad. This is how they're programmed. Because you go out and you ask them, why do they do that? Well, 9 out of 10 people that they stop, who happen to be people of color, do end up having drugs, or do end up something. There's something always. Now, the reality is that they targeted everybody. They find that 8 or 7 out of most people, unfortunately, tragically, more people are doing the stuff than should be. The drugs and all that kind of stuff. So I'm saying that we got to change a whole lot in our system. We got a lot of issues to address. We need more public defenders. Earlier I was talking about it is just. Because if people got fair, proper representation, some of them would not be in jail. And ultimately, when you begin to bring positive role models, if you can, to come back to the school. For example, I would start right here and ask some of the students, where's your school? Are you here in Fayetteville? How far?
30 minutes.
30? Okay, well that's fantastic. Suburb, whatever. I mean, but the fact is there are students here that if you ask the students, find a student leader, would you be willing to engage and get a half a dozen students to come to our school? So, because see, you know, they'll listen to Martin King for a minute, because they say, oh, what Dr. King say? He ain't got nothing to say. Okay, I'll listen. I may have something to say this. And they might listen for a second. But they're really going to listen to their peers. So a young person who went to not just your school, but other schools in this surrounding area, coming back, and that's part of what I hope students do. We need to go back to schools in our communities. Certainly, probably on a weekly basis if we can. Certainly a monthly basis. We could easily go back and encourage those young people, help them understand the value of education, why you must get an education, why it's important to go to college and come to universities, why it's important to get good grades. I mean, you know, the president subliminally is doing that. He doesn't have to say that just by the fact that he represents. Every day we see an African American woman and man married and 2 very important children that represent in a positive way. So subliminally, I think younger children will get the message. But at your level, I think we need to have others going back to those schools. And then you need to identify, I mean, you know, if I'm when I'm back in this community, I'm going to be back in the state in February. February 8th or 9th, I think. So maybe I could come. I'd love to come and have a conversation. So let's do that. Let's talk right after this.
Thank you, guys. Peace be unto you, sir. I'd just like to, you raised the question about African American responsibility to our own, what I call self-genocide. In particular, I use a statistic from the Arkansas Crime Commission. And in Little Rock, in particular, 1 Caucasian was killed in that year, and 41 African Americans were killed. And so this is in Little Rock proper. And my question to you is, what methodology would you suggest for us to be able to look at self-genocide, and because if